building the server side. Let me close this. Building the server side using Node.js. Okay, here it is coming. Okay. So here is what we discussed last time, if you remember. We have here our client, and here our server. And they of course talk using HTTP protocol. So on the server side, we have, as I explained, we have resources. So this is a very generic term that could be either a HTML file, text file, PDF, image, some program that runs and gives you some results. All of those things, we call them resources. Now, if a client wants to get a resource from the server, it sends a GET request followed by a URL. And then the server, if it's static, it will go to the disk and get it and send it to the client. If it's dynamic, it will run a program, and that program can do some computation. It might also go to a database or file and do some manipulation to the data, and then send it off to the requester. So this is very common, and if the resource exists and everything goes okay, the resource will be sent back to the requester, and in the first line you will see a status code saying 200 OK. If the resource does not exist, you will get 404 not found and other codes. Sometimes the clients need to send some information to the server, especially when we fill up forms. When we fill up form, we fill up a form, and then here is the form with a lot of input fields, and typically, this is the most typical, and a submit button. When the user fills up the form, submits, the browser generates typically what type of request, what type of HTTP request it generates. Is it a GET or POST? Usually POST. Again, the URL where the information will be posted to, and there is, in this case, a body of the request. In the body of the request, you will see the values of the form. The values, as I explained last time when we covered forms, the values are sent using a name equal value, semicolon, name equal value, semicolon, and so on. So it's a string. At the end, it's a string, and that string is placed in the body of the request and posted to the server. The server will do some work with it. If everything is OK, it will say 200 OK. If something goes wrong, it will say something like 500 server error or internal error. So then I started explaining how we write this server side. So there are many servers that are pre-built. You just download them and use them. And usually you use them for static files. Somebody has HTML file or GIF or PDFs. This server already pre-built. You just ask it, it gives you the file. Now, if you want to do something dynamic, which means the resource or the result or the response will be generated, then you have to do programming. So there are many ways you can do programming. You can use PHP, you can use Java, you can use .NET, you can use all types of languages. But the most one that is getting more and more famous is Node.js, as I explained last time. Because in Node.js, you can build a web server, and you can do the programming using JavaScript. So you have a unified language in both the client and the server. And we started looking into this, if you remember. So this is where we stopped. You're supposed to see this more in the lab. Did you have the chance to play with this a little bit?
Yeah, we did last time a little bit, but we didn't go deep.
Sorry? Not working on? The countries, you mean? You're working with countries? Or? For the student, my example, the student's example, or? It didn't work?
We will get the response from the server, but then it will not populate the list.
Oh, okay. Oh, I
But
see.
we continue with the professor.
Okay. He explained. Okay. All right. So you still have to really practice this for you to really appreciate it. Anyway, let's move on. So for today, I will just quickly review what. So we build on what we've seen last time, and then we move it forward. So here is our server, a very, very simple JavaScript file. Let me quickly try to explain it. So to build a web server on top of Node.js, you don't need to start from scratch. You use an existing library that you can download using npm install, if you recall. npm. It's one of the very, very famous libraries called Express. So you do npm install express dash save. It gets downloaded to your client or downloaded to your machine, and then you import it. You bring it in to your app.js file. You import it so you can make use of it. The body parser, I will explain it shortly. And then you create an instance of the server. So your server will be in this object called app. So this app is basically a bunch of code that others have wrote. You just use it. So, and then in here, you basically add this line to say if somebody asks for a file, please look for it in the current folder and give it back to the requester. So this line, it says, let's say somebody asks for this file. Sorry, this one does not work. Let me just put it to be charged, if you don't mind, while we talk. Okay. All right, here it is. Let me just restart this server. So when the servers, you basically create this object called app. You configure the route. I will explain what it means. And then finally, you make the server listen at some port. You see in the last line here, I'll say, server, please start listening on this port. And when you are listening, just display a message to the users telling them where you are listening at and what is the URL of this server. So app Express already did all the hard work of basically giving you the building blocks to build a web server. You create an instance of Express, you configure it, and then you start it. You start it by asking it to listen on some port. Now, let me just go to that URL. If I come here and ask for a static resource such as students.html, this is a static resource. It's just a file that exists. So if I request a file, what Node.js will do, or Express more particularly, what Express will do, it will look in the current folder. And it will find this file called student.html, and it will return it to the requester. The line that is responsible of doing this is this simple line. This one. This one is very important line. Have a look when I comment it out. If I comment it, by the way, if you change the server, you have to restart it. So click here again. So now that I did not configure it to serve or to respond to static files, then I will not be able to get that static file. Here it is. If I try to run this, it says cannot get that file, although it exists. So if you want your Express app to also respond to requests for static files, you have to add that line. Okay? So that line makes your server handle two things. It can be dynamic. See, you see here the dynamic part works fine, no problem. If I come here, this content is generated dynamically. It's a function. that I wrote this stuff in. But the other one is static. I'm not writing a program to produce that student.html. It's just a HTML file. So for this server to recognize static files, what should I do? Add this line here. Use express.static, which tells the Express server, please, if somebody asks you for static file, look for them in the current directory. So this line, just copy paste it all the time, make sure you have it. Here I am deciding the port. You can put any port you want. I'm deciding here 9080. I will come and explain this later. Don't worry about it. Okay. Now, to keep this server code organized, I put all my work, like the dealing with files, the reading from files or writing to files, I put it in a separate file. One is called student repository, and another one that I'm working on, it's called hero repository. Basically, these two files, they have functions to read and write to a file. You already know how to do this. You should have done this in the lab, reading countries, filtering them by some criteria, and so on. So the purpose of the server is just to make the functionality in here, to make it available via the web. That is the purpose of the server, the goal of this application, of this server. OK, so let me first start from here. Very, very simple programming model. Remember, because this one is basically I'm building a web server, so it should understand HTTP. And HTTP is all about these verbs that I sent to the server. So the client, sorry, the server side need to listen at some port. If somebody asks using GET request, if somebody asks for the root, you see here slash. Slash means you come to the root of the web server. Then how do you respond? I respond with this static code, static string. By the way, this app.get, it takes two parameters. It has two parameters. It has the URL, because really remember, every resource on my server has a URL. And this URL, of course, is known to the client. So the client, when the client says get or post or whatever other verb, it should use the URL that I'm going to get. So if somebody says get slash, that call will land in here. And the Express, it gives you two objects built in. You don't need to worry about them. They are handed over to you by the server. It says these two are called request and response. Request, you can read what's coming from the client. And the response, you can use it to send the reply. In here, I'm not reading any input. There is no input. They just came to the slash, and I basically give them some string. So here, I go to the response object and say send, and give a string. I am here using the inverted single quotes, so I can have multi-line. That's it. When somebody comes to get slash, they will land in here, and this function will return to them this string. Now, if somebody comes to slash API slash students, the reason why I put that API, it's called Application Programming Interface. In this URL, there is usually it will return me JSON, not HTML. So this one is mainly used by other programs. So other programs can interact with my server. So if somebody comes to slash API slash students, what should I do? Go to the repository that I already wrote and tested, it works fine. And then I get all the students, because this is a promise, I'll use it then. And when this promise is fulfilled, I get at my hand the students. What I do with the students, I send them back to the requester. In this case, I use the response object, and this response, instead of using send, I use send to send text. Now I have JSON at my hand, JSON object. So I use the JSON method to send the JSON. Okay? Now, if I want to test this, very simple. I basically go to that URL, /API/students. That's it, and I will get this in JSON format. This is now programmatically accessible. If I can write a mobile application or HTML page that can fetch this and use it programmatically. This is not for human consumption. This is more for program-to-program interaction. Now, if I'm interested to get only one particular student, I go and say slash, and I pass the parameter. Here I am passing a parameter. So on the server side, I will read this parameter and get only that particular student and send it back to the requester. Here it is. Here it is. I send it back. I get this list. This is one particular student. Now, in terms of program, again, very simple. Here it is. The URL has a parameter. The URL, this is more fashionable URLs. The old way of doing it, you can put a question mark, and you can put, let's say, in this case, student ID equal 1, 2, 3. This is one way of sending parameters in the URL. This is called query string. Query string. And more, like recently, people more and more, they just put slash and the name of the parameter. Sorry, the value of the parameter. Now, in here, I'm telling the server, by the way, this one is static. It's always the same. But this one is a really parameter. Just be careful. So that's why I am putting this colon here to say to the server, please be aware that the last part of the URL is a really parameter. Grab it when the request comes and make it available for me in this built-in object called params. So request has a built-in property called params, and this params allows me to read the parameters that came with the URL. So magically, this ID that was in the URL will be sticked in here. This is by the Express. The people who wrote Express, they do all of this for you. So now I have at my hand the student ID that the user have requested. Then I go to the repository and say, please give me that particular student. And because this is a promise, when it's fulfilled, I get that student. I just display it here for debugging purposes on the console, so I see what's going on. And then I send it back to the requester. If something goes wrong, I will send an error. Okay? That's basically the idea. Is clear? The get. Now, so far, what I have done so far is basically I have created API. I have created a way to I can programmatically call this functionality. This is the power, and this is called the REST services. So on the web, on the resources, have a look at this. Resources could be static file, something that does not change over time. If you put an image there of Qatar University, it will stay that image until somebody changes it. So it is static. It does not change with time. Or it could be some, let's say, some HTML generated by code. So I might have a database. When a student asks for their transcript, I go to the database, get their grades, compute their GPA, build a nice transcript table, and then send it off. The other thing, so this is dynamic, but it is still generating a human consumable resource. Or I could have a resource that generates JSON instead of HTML. So this type of resource, I call it a REST service. REST service, or more recently, also people call it Web API. Web API. So The web is really, there are two major users of the web. There are the human users, typically they deal with HTML pages, and there are the programmatic web. It's very important. The programmable web relies on REST services, also known as web API. What is the major difference between web pages and REST services? What is the major difference? Sorry? Sorry? No. Both of them, this is, for example, look at this. For example, this one, is a dynamic resource. It's generated by code. But this is not a REST service. This is not an API. Because what I get here is HTML, is a string. It's very hard to deal with it programmatically. I have to bring it as a string, and if I want to read any information from it, it's not that easy. I can do some weird search through the string, but it's not programmatically friendly. While the other one, like if I say /students, /API /students, this is a REST service. So what is the difference? Yeah, typically it will return you JSON. And typically it is used by other programs. So dynamic HTML is still for human usage, while REST services is really, this is not for, we don't give this to our end users. This will be nice for a web application or an Android application or iOS application. This is very, very good because I can get this JSON converted to objects and deal with it programmatically. If I want to navigate and display this nicely in a list or a table or a grid, I can do so programmatically. Okay? So REST services or web API, you can think of them similar as web pages, but instead of giving you HTML, what they give you? JSON. Because JSON communicates both the data and the structure. I can get to this information much, much easier. Have a look at this. We will see this shortly, like here it is. This gives me an object. If I want to know what is the GPA, I just come to this object and say .gpa and I get it. But if it was HTML, yes, for humans it's nice table with colors and so on, but it's not very good for programs. Programs don't care about the formatting, they care about the structure. How do I get programmatically to some piece of information without too much headache? You see the difference here? So these are called REST services, and basically they are programs that generates JSON instead of generating HTML. Okay. Now let me show you how we will make use of these REST services in our HTML page. So here is my student. And by the way, these REST services, the power of them is that I can use them from different platforms. I can have a mobile application that uses the same REST services, like your Facebook page, your Facebook app, or your Facebook page on the web. In the back end, on the server side, they use exactly the same API, exactly the same. The REST services, what it allows us to do, it allows us to have multiple interfaces to the same functionality. This is very important. This is the trend. Many companies, like let's say, all major companies, like let's say Amazon, you have Amazon web page and you have Amazon app. And they both use the same REST API. You have Google. Whatever you can do with Google through the interface, you can use it, you can interact with it programmatically through REST services. Same for Facebook, same for, let's say, QNB as an example, for example. You have QNB web application, you have QNB app, and they both use the same backend services. You don't want to rewrite the backend logic. You want to have it once and have multiple interfaces. And this allows it very nicely. So you always expose your functionality as services, and you have the flexibility to call them from different interfaces. Is the idea clear? Okay, now let's see how we can call them from the HTML. Here I have an HTML page, which is student. And this HTML page, let me see what it has. All right, so this HTML, it has a drop-down that is now empty. And it has a place where I will put my table. So empty. There is no data yet. The data will come from the REST service. So when the page loads, I will make a call to the /API/students to do what? To fetch all the students. When I get them at my hand, what do I do with them? Go through them and fill up the dropdown. Then I listen to on-change events. When the student dropdown change, what do? Pick up the selected students, do another fetch. But this time, do I get all students? Only the one selected. And then I get that information and I inject it into the page. That is the programming model, very common, very powerful. Now, if I don't like this web API, web page, I want to make it a web application, no problem. Throw the web page, put an Android application, and do it nicely with a list, whatever user interface controls you want to use, and then fetch the information from exactly the same REST service. So the backend is reusable, and you can dress it up. The user interface, it's up to you which technology you want to use. Okay? So let me show you how this looks like. I already explained it, but just to show you again one more time. Here it is. So in here, to do this exercise, to make it easy to manipulate the DOM, I'm using jQuery, as I explained last time. So jQuery is a library that I can add to my page. Here is how I add it. Of course, I can download it, but I don't want to download it. I just refer to it on the web. And it's very lightweight, very common, very widely used library. It's called jQuery. The latest version is 2.2.2. So I bring it into my page. And then this helps me listen to events, and it helps me change the page dynamically. Of course, I can do all of this using plain JavaScript. But if there is a library to help me, why not? And it's common. It's not like some little boy wrote it and nobody knows about it. This is very widely used. It's worthwhile learning and using. There is no risk of using it. It's not like it will disappear very shortly. So it's there to stay for a long time. It has been there for a long time. So in here, so all the functionality of jQuery is available through this $ parenthesis. In here, I'm saying, please listen to this event called the ready. When the document, the whole document is loaded, fully loaded on the page, I want you to go and get me the students. And when the students come back, because this is a promise, when this promise is fulfilled, I want you to go and fill up that drop-down with the information that came from this fetch. If something goes wrong, just let me know. And then once you fill up the drop-down, I want you to go to this drop-down called student DD, which is drop-down, and listen to this on-change event. When this change event happens, what I want you to do, I want you to call this function on student change. So it's very intuitive. Is clear to everyone? Okay. Look, let me show you. First of all, you have this drop-down, and I give it an ID. Why did I give it an ID? So I can refer to it from the script. So far clear? Okay. Now, for me to use jQuery, please make sure you have added this script to your page. I hope you have. You did. OK, good. Now, make sure the script that is driving this page, your own script that you wrote yourself, is also referred to in the page. So make sure this is there. Once it's all there, the first thing, if you don't have this, it will never work, because you have to listen, you have to wait until you cannot manipulate the page if it's not fully loaded. Wait for it to fully load, and the page is ready to be manipulated. So you need to listen to this event. So you're doing this, you're listening to the ready event? OK, good. Now, here it is. I call this get students. This one is very simple. It just uses fetch. We've seen this fetch, and it returns me the results, and I basically deserialize it to JSON. All right. I have here a JSON object. Now, once I get them, I can also do console to see. Do console in your code to see if things are going well. Then have a look at this. When I get the students, I will call this fill student dropdown. This is a function. And what this is doing, this is an array of students. This is an array. Because why it is an array? Before I can deal with any of these, I have to see the sample data that's coming back. This is how the data is coming back from the server. It's an array. Why is it an array? Because you see here, the first character in this document is square bracket. That denotes an array. An array of objects. I have many objects here. Each object has how many properties? 2, student's ID and name. So all I'm doing, in the code, what I'm doing, looping through this array one by one, and then taking the student's ID and the name and filling the dropdown. OK, here is how you do it. This is the best way, the most elegant, simple way of doing it using jQuery. I loop through, here it is. I loop through each student in the student array, and then I create an option. Remember, I have a dropdown. Dropdown is made up of options. An option has 2 major properties. The value, this is what the user does not see. This is what you can programmatically get from the dropdown. And this is what the user sees. OK? So that's it. I want the value to be set to student's ID, and I want the text to be the student name. Then I take this option and I append it to my dropdown. It cannot be more clear and elegant than this. You take every student, you basically convert it to visually to an option. You take that option, what do you do with it? You stick it or you append it to the dropdown. Make sure the ID is correct. The ID in the page is the same ID referring to in the script. Make sure you put this in jQuery, to be an object. OK? And just do it this way. It's better to take this code and basically adapt it to your needs and gradually learn that way. So you did all of this and it's not working? The students on change did not work? On change. Maybe you are not properly loading jQuery. Make sure jQuery is loaded. Anyway, one of you, if you can please just send me your code. I can look at it very quickly and tell you where is the problem. So, but this one I can see it's fully working. All right. Now, this on change, I am listening to this on change event. When it happens, I want to run this. Here it is. I jump there. So this on change, basically this dot val, this refers to the object that raised the event. In this case, the object that raised the event is the dropdown. So if I want to know the currently selected value of the dropdown, I can use this.val. This will give me the selected student. Then I use that to fetch that particular student. And when the fetch is successfully done, I go and say then and display that student. All right? Now, displaying the student, you can do it imperatively and generate code using JavaScript. This is not very good at all, generating code using JavaScript. Instead, you can use a template. So you have a template, you have an object at your hand, and you take the template, you take the object, you inject it into the template, and you get your final display. So let me show now, to use templates, you need to use another library. There are many templates engines out there. One of them, quite widely used, it's called Handlebars. Again, I'm not downloading this library, I'm just getting it from the web. Make sure you have internet. Maybe you have internet in the lab? There? Okay. Strange. All right. So, what? Yeah, after maybe I can see it after the class very quickly. All right. Here is a template. Have a look at this template. So to create a handlebar template, you just have a script. Have a look. You have a script here, script tag. And you give your template an ID. And in the type, instead of putting JavaScript, you put this one. It doesn't matter, just copy paste it. This is the type. So this is not really JavaScript, this is just a template. But you put it in a script tag. And then the values you will read from the object that will be passed in the template, you put it between double curly brace. So the student object has student ID, first name, last name. So these are placeholders. They will be filled based on the data coming from the object that will be given to the template. So you have a template and you have an object. And in a template, you refer to properties of the object that will come later on. This template, very simple. As you can see, just use curly braces and refer to the properties of your object. You are not limited to this. It's much more powerful. If you have, you can also do a list. Remember that a student has many courses. So you can loop through the courses array. And in this case, I am converting every course to a list item. I will have here, I want the course code and the course name. And each course has an instructor. I will go instructor first name and instructor last name. This stuff, I didn't get it from nowhere. I got it from an example. You have to have an example JSON so you know the structure of what you are getting. Here is the JSON. So I know I will get a student at a runtime. This is what a student has. I pick and choose what I need. So here, these are simple properties. So I put them between curly brace. But this one, is it a simple property? It's an array. So I use a loop to loop through it. The loop is very simple. Hash each and the property name. Each course, and you close the /h, each, to close that kind of loop. And then from here, I'm grabbing the course name and grabbing the course name. Sorry, the course code and the course name. Instructor is also an object. So I'll do instructor dot first name, instructor dot last name. You got the idea. So you have to see an object and then grab from that object the stuff that you need. And you put it in the template. Now, at a runtime, have a look. At a runtime, to merge the two, for you to merge the data with the template, you first grab the template from the page. This is how you do it. This one, you select in that element called student template. You get in the HTML of that element, the inner. You basically get in this stuff. That line will give you the actual template. Will give you this whole table. Okay? It will give you this whole table. And then what do we do with that whole table? I go ahead and basically compile it. This is the way Handlebar works. You just have a look at the documentation. There's nothing creative here. It's just documentation. Tell us, grab the template, compile it, and then feed it the object you want to display. And then magically the HTML will be generated. Now the HTML that gets generated, you have to inject it back on the page so the user can see it. This is what it's doing. So I'll go to another div called student details, and the generated HTML, I stick it in that div. Have a look. In my page, there is a div here. By the way, I don't need this. Do I need it? No, I don't need it. There is a div called student details. So after so there are two things. There is the template, and there is a place where I inject the generated HTML. It's a very nice way of separating the UI from your logic. Is clear? The idea clear? Okay. Now, in the lab, what you will do also, you will take this further, this lab. You will create here a form to pick up the details from the user. You fill up a form, and then you post it to the server side. On the server side, you read the details, and you save them back to the form. Okay, but the same idea, similar. Instead of using get, you will use post. And you will send some details and read them back on the server side. So that's what you will be doing in the lab. All right.